Good afternoon. I'm Andrew Toasty, and I'm one of the directors of development here at Team Rubicon. Just to set the stage for all you folks, today we're going to be talking about Hurricane Sally and its impending landfall, which is now expected to tomorrow morning. We're going to talk about TR's current positioning on the ground and how Hurricane Sally may impact those recovered from Hurricane Laura. Um, Big thank you for all of you to joining us this afternoon. Your generous support and investment we received from all of you helps sustain our teams and gets us to yes for getting boots on the ground to help those communities affected by disaster. So thank you again for being here and thank you for your support. Um, Today, I'm going to present to you three presenters here. So Jake, our founder and CEO, he's going to give everyone a brief update on his trip to down to Louisiana to discuss the effects from Hurricane Laura and what he saw on the ground, and also going to talk about what Hurricane Sally means for Laura impacted areas and survivors. We'll then switch over to Lauren, our Senior Associate of Operations Planning. She'll give a situation update on everything going on currently, what we know about Hurricane Sally, and about the communities in the path of the storm. And then we'll switch over to Lee Harvey, our Crisis Innovation Lead. He's on the ground in Alabama, and he'll be there to provide a briefing and more context to what he's seeing on the ground. For those of you on the call, please put in your questions into the chat, into the Q&A, and we'll be sure to get to those as we get to the end of the segment. So, Jake, introducing you, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, and thank you to everybody who has joined this call today. As Andrew outlined, we expect Hurricane Sally to make landfall in the greater Mississippi, Alabama area in the next 24 hours. The situation remains fluid. There's a lot that can still happen with regard to the storm. What we do know is that it's likely this storm will hit somewhere in the Category 1 range, which means that wind speeds will be much lower than what we saw 2 weeks ago with Hurricane Laura, but it is expected to dump a massive amount of water along the coastline. And so this will be what we refer to as a water-based event. My colleague Lauren, who is just an absolute wizard with our planning processes and the tools that we use to visualize these different scenarios, is going to walk you through a little bit of the specifics of what we're expecting to see out of Hurricane Sally. But I want to start this hour by just relaying to you some of what I saw late last week. I had the opportunity to join one of our amazing patrons, Bob Parsons, down on the ground in Lake Charles, Louisiana, last Friday. You've probably heard Bob and his wife Renee have put up a $2 million matching challenge for our efforts in response to Hurricane Laura. So let's rewind the clock here. Let's go back 2 or 3 weeks. Team Rubicon was messaging all of you in preparation for Hurricane Laura's land. In the 24 hours before that hurricane made landfall, it accelerated rapidly from I believe a Category 1 or Category 2 to almost a Category 5 storm when it slammed into the Louisiana coast there in southwest Louisiana. The impacts of Hurricane Laura have been devastating, and I got to see them firsthand. This was a major wind event. Fortunately, the residents of southwest Louisiana were spared the unsurvivable storm surge that was at times predicted right up to the event. Nonetheless, from the ground as we were touring the area, it was clear that nearly not a single power pole survived this event. That's been evidenced by the fact that many, if not most, all of the residents of Lake Charles and the surrounding parishes are still without power. It knocked out the water sanitation systems. Numerous trees were down all over the roadways. And so this was a very chaotic and dangerous. Again, Team Rubicon was pre-positioned with our route clearance teams, some senior leaders on the ground. We were able to liaise immediately with local officials. And I got to see firsthand just the incredible impact that those early teams were able to have. As we landed at the airport, got picked up by our teams, we had, great freedom of movement, moving along the major thoroughfares. And you could see all of the trees that had been cut alongside the roadways, granting that freedom of movement back. That's really important because, obviously, you have to have emergency services that are able to move along these ways to reach survivors of the storm. You need to have, access for utility companies to get in, begin rehanging lines for the transmission of power, and, of course, all of the other services that are required to get those communities back up online. So it was a major effort by Team Rubicon. As that phase began to subside, we immediately positioned those chainsaw and heavy equipment teams into allowing access back into homes. So many people had evacuated the storms. When they came back, they couldn't even reach their homes. This is a very rural population. Many of these driveways, these entry points for their homes were blocked by numerous trees. And these are big southern trees that we're talking about. It's going to take an entire team to cut and clear some of these. As well, some people who didn't evacuate, of course, were then stuck in their home. When you're stuck in your home in Southwest Louisiana, without power, without access to clean water, without cellular activity, that can become a dangerous situation really fast. So our team was doing really, really critical work, and they continue to do critical work. The other thing I was able to see our team doing down there, which was really amazing, was tarping some of the roofs. I remember as we were flying in, as we were flying out, looking out the window and observing just all of these blue dots that were dotting the landscape. And those were, of course, blue tarps, which have almost become synonymous with some of these big wind events. I can't explain to you how critical this tarping activity is in those first weeks after a storm. And as we're looking at this next hurricane, Hurricane Sally, come in with all this water that it's going to dump. Make no mistake, Hurricane Sally is now trended back eastward along the Gulf Coast, but its outer bands are still going to bring a ton of rain to these communities that were impacted 2 weeks ago. So if these homes in the Lake Charles and the Hurricane Laura impact zone had their roofs damaged, now we're talking about coming back through and dumping water in through those holes. And now we're talking about the disaster after the disaster. We're talking about contents of those homes that may have been salvageable that may no longer be. We're talking about homes themselves that may have been salvageable that may no longer be salvageable if enough water damage happens. So we're in a race against time down in Southwest Louisiana. We've got over 100 gray shirts on the ground doing amazing work. And of course, this work is made massively more complicated by COVID-19. That was the other thing that amazed me was the discipline with which our teams were observing those COVID-related protocols that we worked hard to put in place, maintaining social distancing in the field, in the building. We're doing just-in-time training as volunteers are flying in, able to maintain that social distance in the classroom, and in the training field. People observing, wearing masks. The hygiene was really just kind of impressive given the environment that they were working in. So really proud of everything that the team's been able to do down there. And again, all of that enabled by Bob and Renee Parsons and PXG Golf with that $2 million grant. I mean, that opportunity gave us the freedom, the liberty to make really aggressive choices in the last 10 days to move hundreds of gray shirts into the area to really get after this work. Now, of course, we're making sure that they're going to maintain safety while Hurricane Sally comes in. We were putting plans in place should we have had to evacuate those gray shirts. But of course, now as this storm is tracking back a little bit and hooking back towards the east, we know that they're not going to be in direct harm's way. But again, it's really now a race against time to make sure that we're getting those roofs tarped and protecting the property of people that we can. We have some photos from the ground. Lauren's actually going to share some photos that we have been able to take down in Lake Charles. You're going to be able to see these here. I'll talk you through a little bit about what we're doing. So here you can see a home that was pretty severely damaged. You can see substantial damage along the roof line. You can imagine that a substantial rainstorm that would come in, like Hurricane Sally, going to dump a lot of water. It could destroy this home. Now, you might look at this home and say, well, this looks destroyed. This home itself is actually salvageable right now. So these gray shirts are working hard to weatherproof this home so that it can survive until a contractor comes. A couple things you're going to see. They're all wearing masks. A handful of the gray shirts are wearing safety harnesses. That's for if they go up on the roof. We're taking all the necessary safety precautions to make sure we have that fall protection. Go ahead to the next slide. And here you can just see the extent of the damage itself. Again, this home, significant damage, but it is salvageable. And one of the things that I'll point out here is, the effort that we make, and Lauren's team is a substantial part of this, is directing our assistance to those homeowners who might otherwise be left behind. What's that mean? This might be a homeowner that's elderly. This might be a homeowner with disability or a lower socioeconomic status. It's likely this homeowner may not have insurance. If they own the home outright, if it's an intergenerational home, there's a chance that it's not insured. And so, we have the opportunity to intervene here, protect that homeowner from financial. Next photo. Here you can see our gray shirts arriving on scene. So, I had the opportunity to tour this facility. It's an amazing setup that the city of Lake Charles has given us the opportunity to use. And because we have a lot of first-time deployers that are coming in, we've been able to set up a day-long disaster training. Again, you can see, safety protocols being adhered to. Our gray shirts are wearing masks. They're maintaining social distance. It might be a little hard to see here just because of the depth of the photo, but really amazing opportunity to have access to this facility and get our gray shirts trained so they can have more impact in the field. Next slide. And again, one of the most important things that we're doing here is protecting those roofs. So, here you have a gray shirt, up on a roof line, preparing to put a blue tarp on this roof. Again, that blue tarp is not the long-term solution. They have, a half-life to them, but it's a stopgap that protects that home until contractors can get in and replace the roof. Next slide. And again, I mentioned it earlier, but these chainsaw and heavy equipment teams that we utilize are so critical. Our sawyers go through a multi-day training course in order to get certified to run a saw. It's not something that we take lightly. This is obviously a very dangerous activity, made more dangerous by the fact that these trees are twisted under incredible torque on their way down. So it's much more dangerous than just felling a tree and cutting it up in your backyard. Again, emphasis on safety, gloves, hard hat, face visor, chaps. You can even see, for those of you that were in the military, you can see that IFAK on this individual's hip, an individual first aid kit. Out of safety. Next. But I think most importantly, it's incumbent upon us to focus on the survivors. These Americans down in Southwest Louisiana rode out a top 10 storm in U.S. history. Hurricane Laura was a devastating hurricane that slammed into this coast. And I think the most tragic part of this tragedy is that America seemingly has not cared. These are people down. When I was going from home to home and meeting with some of these homes, I heard the same thing. Why has America forgotten about us? Why is nobody paying attention? This situation has the potential to further devolve into a true crisis, given the lack of power, given the lack of access, given the lack of visibility and funding that's been made available to assist. We are still short of our fundraising goal for Hurricane Laura. Now we have Hurricane Sally bearing down, on a different part of this coastline. Our resources are going to be stretched thin. We need our partners to rise to the occasion alongside us to enable our work so that we can make sure that these Americans are not left behind. I think that would be the true tragedy here, because we can't control Mother Nature. We're going to get hit with hurricanes. We're going to get punched in the face by Mother Nature on occasion. As Americans, we need to step up and respond and punch back. My fear here today is America has moved on far too early in this disaster. And of course, it's only going to get worse in the next 24 hours. Again, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today. I look forward to the Q&A session here at the end. As a reminder, you can submit questions directly through the Blue Jeans app. But with that, I'll turn it back over to my colleague, Andrew.
Thanks, Jake, and thanks for going through those images. Really powerful reminder about the devastation left in the area. So thank you again. I'm going to turn this over to Lauren, our colleague, our Senior Associate Operations Planning, for a situation update. Lauren, over to you.
Thanks, Andrew. So I wanted to provide you a situation update on Hurricane Sally and show how we monitor and identify potential areas in need. I'm sharing one of the dashboards we are using to analyze this robust amount of information to help us make informed decisions, because we know in a disaster, and especially a fluid situation like this, we are making those decisions very, very quickly. So I'll be clicking through some of these layers just to explain what's going on. So what would eventually become Hurricane Sally first developed over the Bahamas late last week. It moved over southern Florida on September 12th before strengthening into a tropical storm later that day. Once it was over the warm and open Gulf, the storm rapidly intensified, becoming a Category 1 hurricane on September 14th, and then strengthening to a Category 2 fairly quickly after that. It has since downgraded to a Category 1 just overnight. So that leads us to where we are right now. Hurricane Sally is currently located about 105 miles southeast of Mobile, Mississippi. Nope, did that wrong. Alabama, moving at 2 miles per hour with winds at 80 miles per hour. Hurricane warnings here are in red, with the tropical storm warnings in blue, which are currently in effect. You can see that the outer bands are currently affecting portions of the southeast, from Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, etc. The storm is projected to make landfall tomorrow morning in Mobile Bay. So when we look at some of the impacts we're seeing, and we'll click through some of this really quickly, we'll look at the precipitation forecast over the next 72 hours. The storm is a little bit lopsided, with majority of the rain focused on the north and eastern quadrant of the eye of the storm. So a lot of that rain is going to be focused in that area. Looking at this, the purple areas is going to be the highest likelihood or highest precipitation, anywhere from 10 to 20 inches, with potential for isolated areas to have 30 inches of rain. Especially as the storm continues to slow down, it just prolongs how long these bands will be dumping rain in the area. So that's going to be the greatest concern. Wind will be a factor, but as Jake said, this is going to be a water event. Storm surge will also be a big concern in some of those coastal areas as well. So what we've known is that the storm is just changing a lot. The initial projections actually had the storm making landfall almost directly over New Orleans, but it's since strengthened and the track has continued to shift east. So as Jake talked through Hurricane Laura, which devastated portions of Louisiana, it was really focused more on the southwestern part of the state. But just want to turn off a few things here and turn on. So looking at the observed track of Laura, we can see kind of the comparison of what we saw and where the wind had an effect. So you can see this was the path of Hurricane Laura. This is as far as the winds pushed out, which was much more of a wind event. And you can see how close, some of that overlap is, where areas that may have been affected with some tropical storm force winds may also see additional rain from Hurricane Sally. Another thing to just look at for these areas, as I move through this, is looking at even some of the additional threats that have occurred in the area. So we have our tornado assessments from the year. You can see as it slowly populates, this is the path of tornadoes that have struck in just 2020. So just this year, the amount of tornadoes that have been concentrated in this part of the country. Some of them were significant storms that have not necessarily recovered from those events either. And this area also, as many of you are aware, Hurricane Michael hit about 2 years ago in the Florida panhandle, making landfall between Mexico Beach and Panama City. That was a wind-based event, hit as a Category 5 storm, causing a lot of structural damage, storm surge to that area. So some of these same areas are going to be struck by Hurricane Sally as well. Just want to quickly talk through some of the populations and the other factors that we consider when we look at responding to different areas. So who will potentially be affected by this disaster? One of the pieces of information we'll look at is the Social Vulnerability Index. What that is it analyzes 15 demographics and identifies communities and neighborhoods that rank high in factors such as poverty rates, lack of access to transportation, minority status, and language, and crowded housing. These social conditions may affect a community's ability to prevent human suffering, and financial loss in the event of a disaster. So these communities are those we want to assist. So what we do is we compare these areas with the effects from the storm. And then once the storm strikes, we then compare where we're seeing different damage reports, et cetera, whether that's wind-based or water-based. So we can see in this area of the path of the storm and outwards because of that rain, we can see portions of Mobile County, Baldwin County in Alabama, Santa Rosa County in Florida, even all the way up to Montgomery County in Alabama. So we know a lot of these counties in here just rank high for that social vulnerability that we look at. Another thing I just want to show you guys as well that we look into consideration is those who have areas with higher percentages of their community who are over the age of 65. So looking at a few of these just to call out, and these are not the only ones that we're calling out, but Mobile County, for example, has 38% of their 65 and over community are disabled. Montgomery County has 41% of their community of 65 and over that have a disability as well. So these are some of just the factors we're looking at as a whole to consider and layer with where we think there's going to be impacts to understand as a whole where we think those most at-risk communities will have the most unmet need. Mississippi as a whole, their poverty rate currently is 10.8%, which is up from 5.4% in February of this year. Same with Alabama is up to 7.9%, up from 2.7% earlier this year. As well as Florida is all the way at 11.3% poverty rate, up from 2.8% as well. And even turning our attention to COVID, Louisiana, Florida, Mississippi, and Alabama all are in the top 5 states with the highest total cases per resident. Mississippi has the highest number of deaths over the last 7 days per resident in the US, which is then followed by Florida. So we know that these communities have traditionally experienced a lot of disasters in the past, have vulnerable populations, and then on top of that, we're now adding COVID as a consideration. So as the storm makes landfall, which it hasn't yet, so we know once it makes landfall, we're going to look deeper into these factors to help us understand those communities and who has the most unmet needs. So I thank you for your time. I'll hand it back to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Lauren, and thanks for the situation update. I'm going to pass this over to my colleague, Lee Harvey, who's our crisis lead innovator. So Lee, over to you, who's on the ground in Alabama.
Hi, thanks, Andrew. Hey, guys. Hey, this is Lee Harvey. I am on the ground here in Mobile, Alabama at this time. I have with me David Burke, our Senior Vice President of Field Operations. I have Vice President of Government Relations, and that's Jeff Byard and Jeremy Heinen from Marcoms. I am the Crisis Innovation Lead for Team Rubicon. So what does that mean? Basically what that means is we find new ways to service some of these vulnerable communities. If that means we change our outlook towards how we problem solve, how we change our operational approach, how we change our operational design, the areas that we focus on, that's what we're doing. So we're here on the ground here in Mobile. I'm currently in the Mobile County EMA. Jeff has some contacts here, so we're getting around. We've been meeting people from state and local authorities since we've been here on the ground, and we're trying to tie into their response lanes and see where we can help bolster their response, and if we have to, identify potential hotspots that we can immediately react to. As of this morning, we got out this morning. This morning I was eating breakfast, and I overheard a couple talking about, what the storm was going to do. And I politely asked them, asked them a question, why didn't they leave? And at the end of it, they said they don't have any options. They don't have a house on the high ground where they can move to. So they have to hunker down. And as we moved around and just did a initial reconnaissance this morning to pinpoint some potential hotspots, we saw people, you seen the sense of urgency as people were boarding up their houses instead of leaving because they don't have anywhere else to go. Life is challenging enough. They just don't have those options. And that's what happens in a low attention disaster. It goes away and and these people tend to get forgotten. So that's why we're here. We're here to make sure some of these people don't get forgotten. So we went out, we moved around. You can feel the wind picking up. You can see the storm surge coming in. Roads are already being shut down. Police officers are directing traffic for those who can leave. Others are scrambling to get food, make sure they have water, and you see the despair in their face because they just don't have any other options. So we'll hunker down later on tonight, but right now we're making inroads with local authorities to see where we can help and assist them, and then we'll go to ground and hang out. And I had some friends that called me and said, "Hey man, why are you going to a hurricane?" And you know what? It isn't the first time I've been in harm's way. I've been in harm's way for my country, but now I'm willing to go in harm's way for our communities. So some of these people don't have an option. And if I have the ability, and if we have the ability to help, then that's what I'm going to do. And I'm thankful for Team Rubicon to give me that opportunity to provide help to some of these forgotten communities. And hopefully we can draw some attention to some of these low attention disasters so that they just don't go away in the midst of all the other distractions that are out there. All right, I'll wait on your questions. Andrew, back to you.
Thanks, Lee. Appreciate it. So we're going to open this up for a Q&A. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'd be happy to answer all those for you. First, thank you, Gerald, for your question. First question is, how do we donate to take advantage of the matching funds by PXG? So one, you can go on our website and make a direct donation, and we're also happy to reach out to you. So if you want to reach out to us at development@teamrubiconusa.org, we'd be happy to answer any of those questions and help get that set up for you. We're just looking through some other questions here.
And Andrew, I'll add on that, to the question about how do we take advantage of the PXG matching challenge. Certainly we would ask and appreciate anybody here who is a personal contribution, as Andrew mentioned. Go to the website, and we make it pretty easy for you to donate there once you get there. But think about who else can you reach out to? How can you have a multiplying effect across your social network? That might mean going to your employer, the company you work for, and saying, "Hey, we should do an employee drive, raise money, for this community in Louisiana, in Alabama, in Mississippi." Think about friends and family. Think about you can start a fundraiser on Facebook and crowdsource donations via social media. From our perspective and from everything I saw on the ground in Lake Charles, this is an all hands on deck situation, and we'd ask for you to do anything that you can.
Thanks, Jake. We have a question from Alyssa here. She's asking, is Team Rubicon helping with the California wildfires?
Lauren, why don't you give a quick precursor just on the situation with the wildfires, and then we can discuss.
Sure, Jake. So obviously the weather has not been conducive and has been causing an excessive number of wildfires throughout the West. California has seen the most significant number of wildfires, but we're also seeing them in Washington State, Oregon, Colorado, Utah, Idaho, you name it. It's been over, I believe, 4 million acres this year have been burned, and seeing at times over 100 active wildfires that are uncontained at a time. And currently not looking like there'll be much relief at this moment, so they'll keep continuing to burn.
Yeah, and so what we're doing currently, Alyssa, and thank you for the question. We are standing by to assist these communities once these fires are contained. Our organization does not actively fight alongside wildland firefighters to contain these fires. That's obviously a very dangerous activity that is handled primarily by federal, state, and local authorities, as it should be. However, we do play an important role in the post-fire recovery period. We've recently executed an incredible operation down in Niland, California, I think approximately 80 structures were burned in that community. It was a community with very limited resources. We had our heavy equipment teams move in there and clear all of those properties out, saving several $1 million for the community. So, those are the types of things that we can do. But again, we have to wait for those fires to subside, both just for the practical reasons of keeping our gray shirts safe, but also because of the nature of how those disasters are managed by federal, state, and local authorities. Thank you for the question.
Another question for Lauren, Jake, and for Lee as well. Bruce asks, how big of a team is on the ground and for how long? So I think we can answer both of these. One, what's going on in Louisiana, and also talk about our pre-staging for Hurricane Sally as well.
Lee, why don't you take what the current situation is for Hurricane Sally? What's the present state of the team on the ground, and then what are we anticipating moving in maybe in the next 72, 96, 120, and then I can talk about like.
All right, thanks, Jake. Yeah, currently we have 4 guys here on the ground. All 4 of us are here in the mobile EMA, and we have recon teams on standby as soon as the storm passes. So we're identifying, potential responses, tying into the local authorities, making sure that we're good to go. We know where they're going to need efforts from, and where the most likely big, heavy movements are going to come from. So that's what we have here on the ground here in Mobile.
Yeah, and Lauren, perhaps you can share the decision to stand down the route clearance teams because of the nature of the storm.
Sure. So we have a route clearance team that would go in immediately after a hurricane makes landfall to basically cut out the roads that are most important for first responders and for community members to move to get immediate resources. So the trigger for that is a hurricane of 3 or 4 and higher because of the winds tied to that. So because this storm downgraded and, the category of a hurricane is going to be tied to the wind. So category 1 hurricane means the winds they're not going to be as strong as, a category 5, but the threat here is still rain. So that decision was made because of the downgrading of the category of the hurricane.
Thanks, Lauren. And with regard to Lake Charles and the effort we have going on down in Southwest Louisiana, we currently have around, I think it's actually 99 boots on the ground. It's been fluctuating between approximately 100 and 150. The primary limiting factor that we have in that operation is housing, or billeting as we call it. Because of our COVID-19 protocols, we are billeting our volunteers at approximately 50% of the capacity that we otherwise would. And that's made it really challenging for us to find sufficient housing for our volunteers. Because, of course, in addition to space, we need access to showers, hygiene facilities, power. So there's a lot of variables that are making it challenging for us on the ground. We currently have our volunteers spread across 3 billets, and we'll continue to expand that operation as it proceeds. Question here, Andrew, I'll just take it. Will there be more deployment flights? Yes. We've committed to the community of Lake Charles and the surrounding area to be on the ground through at least October 31st. We were really pleased to be able to make that commitment to them, to the local authorities. I got to make a plug here. We were only able to do that because of the generosity of PXG and Bob and Renee Parsons. Otherwise, we would have had to shut that operation down at the end of this month, which would have been a real tragedy.
Thanks, Jake. We have another question for you here. How do you connect with homeowners, and how do they know TR is on the ground ahead?
I lost Lee. Well, we can't send the rescue team because Lee is the rescue team. Lee, did you hear the question?
No, I did. I had to turn on the lights. It's on the time sensor. I'm sorry. Go ahead one more time, Andrew.
Yeah, Lee, if you could help everyone, how do we connect with homeowners on the ground, and how do they know TR is on the ground to help?
Honestly, I think I'm gonna have to defer that to Lauren because I'm not. I've only been here 4 months, so I really don't know the answer to that one, unfortunately.
No problem. I can grab that. So, there's many different ways, but with recon teams down there like Lee and David, they'll begin those connections. We've already established those connections first off within that community, but they're going to go strengthen those connections and talk to the community and let them know what our capabilities are and how we'll be able to assist and when and how many people, and have those discussions. So that's the immediate connection with the community. And that can spread from there. We'll also work with other nonprofits such as Crisis Cleanup who intake homeowner requests, and we can work with them to help identify homeowners. But it's really that establishment at the very beginning, as soon as possible, to communicate to the municipality, with the government officials there, and other nonprofits to really spread that word that we're there. Obviously, we'll push out in social media, or other outlets to just make it known that we're there, we're here to help. So please, if you need assistance, reach out.
Thanks, Lauren. Another question here from Pat. Given the volume of need regarding fires, COVID, hurricanes, and the percentage of deployable gray shirts staff, his concerns always relate to burnout and numbers needed for getting shit done. How is TR addressing the increased need for qualified boots on the ground?
Yeah, I'm happy to step in. This isn't just a concern. This is a reality, and one that we're battling. We knew early in April, as we were getting, about a month into this COVID-19 crisis, we knew that volunteer availability was quickly become a major factor. As we were, we initially sprung up well over 100 simultaneous operations across the country. We've run over 300 operations across the country, the vast majority of them related to COVID-19. This has been an unprecedented scale of deployments across the organization for us. Put that in perspective, we've deployed, I think the number I just saw come across my desk is 3.5 times as many deployable days this year, gray shirt deployments as we did this time last year. So, you're looking at a 400% increase in activity. Burnout is a reality. We have been spending a substantial amount of effort investing in recruiting new gray shirts, so increasing our throughput at the top of our volunteer funnel, as well as investing heavily in getting them through that training funnel so that they are becoming deployable, so that they're gaining skills. There's been a Herculean effort on our capabilities and training team to move what is typically in-person training to an online environment. Some of that is go at your own pace. Some of that is virtual instructor-led. So that training has continued. Particular to the situation in Lake Charles, I believe approximately between 40 and 50% of people who have volunteered to deploy are first-time deployers. This is great. That means that we're expanding the circle of people who are getting involved with the organization. But that also means there's a lot of inexperience coming onto the ground. One of the photos that Lauren shared that I briefed on was a photo of the training facility that we've been given access to. So what we've set up is a disaster training camp, and we have our best instructors across heavy equipment and chainsaw operations on the ground who are giving just-in-time training to those volunteers as they're coming through. And I should mention the roof tarping as well. We've brought in instructors for that. So, we're making sure that we're getting that training immediately on the ground and then getting those volunteers out in the field so that they can get that training into action. There's a positive consequence to that. The positive consequence is those people then go home and they've developed these new skill sets, and now they're on standby, which with a much higher impact potential for future operations. We're going to see the same thing with Hurricane Sally. This part of the Gulf Coast area is one of our sparsest volunteer areas in the country. It's a sparsely populated area to begin with, but the density of Team Rubicon volunteers in this particular part of America is really, really low, which means that we're going to have to expand that radius of volunteer deployability and activate flight ops should, of course, the damage warrant it. So we have to continue to recruit new gray shirts. We have to continue to get people through that training pipeline. We have to continue to innovate and think outside the box for how we can get people onto the ground with the right skill sets and with the right tools to have impact in the community. But thank you for the question.
Thanks, Jake. I do want to read a comment from Kristen Wussier here. She said she's going to submit a request to her employer to donate and match her donation. So I just want to say a big thank you to Kristen. A lot of folks, if you could do that as well, we would really appreciate that. It's a great way to get involved here. Jake, that leads me to my next question. Besides donating to Team Rubicon, what else can folks do to help spread the word, get involved in the fight?
Well, I think you said it. Spreading the word is instrumental. This organization, we have near limitless potential to have impact in this country and around the world, but we need to increase the number of people who know the good work that we're doing. So, follow us on social media, share our content, encourage your friends to follow, forward our newsletter, invite your friends and colleagues and family to these briefings. And I'm confident that when people get involved with this organization, when they see this organization in action, when they see that impact, they know that their investment, their dollars are generating a high return. I mean, we've been proud of that. Over the last decade, we do more with every dollar that's given to us than just about any organization, and we're proud of that. We take great pride in it. But we need more people to be involved. So spreading the word is certainly a big component of it. And finally, I would just say, consider signing up. Consider becoming a gray shirt. You don't have to be, you don't have to look like Lee Harvey to get. We have jobs, we have roles for everyone in this organization. It could be supporting remotely from your computer. We have plenty of jobs and tasks that require that type of remote support, so you don't ever have to get on an airplane. But we have jobs that are in the field for all physical abilities, people with disabilities, people of all ages, and I'd encourage you to consider that.
Great. Thanks, Jake. This is a question for Lee. Lee, what is the city's response to Sally, and how are we working with them?
Well, right now we're actually in their emergency operations center. Jeff, David, and Jeremy are getting a briefing on their response, and so we're kind of coordinating if we have recon teams that are coming in, where our recon teams will be applied, which routes, because they're going to be doing route clearance, and so what are the triggers to get our recon team down? What routes were they going to be called upon to access first? Where traditionally the high water marks within Mobile County. So we're just identifying, where we may be needed, and possibly position our forces to react to that. So we're getting a good brief, and then also, they took us outside and showed us, some of the tools and assets that they have, so that we know what they bring to the fight, and so we know, and we'll tell them the same. This is what we bring. This is our package. This is our capabilities. So it's a hand-in-glove operation here. So, it's been very, very fruitful. Jeff has been incredible with linking us up with the right people, and they've been really, really encouraging and welcoming. So they're happy to see us, and we're happy to be here.
Thanks, Lee. Appreciate that. Jake, one more question for you here. Will there ever be an opportunity for gray shirts in their 60 to deploy on the ops?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked that question. So to provide context to our listeners, one of the hardest decisions that we had to make was, amongst the decisions surrounding the safety of our volunteers, was the choice to reduce or restrict is the word I'm looking for, restrict the deployability of our gray shirts over the age of 65. The evidence is clear. The mortality rates for COVID-19 for that age threshold spike significantly. And so in keeping with that guidance from CDC, we made the tough choice to restrict that deployability. When we made that choice, going on 6 months ago, I don't think any of us thought that COVID-19 would still be, wreaking havoc across the country as it continues to do today. So we certainly do not think that we're going to have to continue that restriction. At the end of the day, this is really about the safety of our volunteers. We know that they're hard chargers. We know they're motivated. I'm frequently contacted by members of our over 65 Glacier community asking this question, challenging the logic behind it. At the end of the day, leadership is about making tough choices. This is among the toughest I've had to make at Team Rubicon. I know it's not popular, but we made it for the right reasons and with the safety of our people in mind. And unfortunately, until we see a clear path towards safety for those individuals, that restriction is going to have to remain in place. I say that with regret because this is probably one of our most valuable demographics. They deploy frequently. They've got mountains of experience. They've got tremendous skill, but unfortunately, it'll have to remain.
Thanks, Jake. One more question here for you. What role will funding play in elongating or shortening Team Rubicon's response to Sally and to Laura?
Great question. I've gotten into the habit around Team Rubicon of saying that there's a dozen things more important to us than money, but they all cost money. The reality is that COVID-19 has stretched this organization's resources in ways that we didn't foresee at the beginning of the year. We have taken numerous measures to ensure the financial health of the organization, and we remain financially healthy. However, we have burned a lot of our dry powder on unforeseen COVID-19 operations throughout the country. So when I say that, I mean our unrestricted ready reserve funding. The Bob and Renee Parsons gift, $2 million, has allowed us to make a substantial commitment to Southwest Louisiana, again, through the end of October. And we'll work there to expend all of those funds and all of the matching contributions that come in. But the reality is that Hurricane Sally, again, pending what types of impacts it creates, we will face a similar, very tough choice. We cannot jeopardize the long-term viability of this organization for any single op. And that's among the hardest choices that I have to make as a CEO, with the guidance of, my CFO and our board. So we're hopeful, of course, that this storm does not cause the damage that we're predicting. That's hope number one. Hope number two is that, this country rises up and provides the resources should that damage happen. Hope is not a strategy, so we'll have plans in place, contingency plans in place, but, we will be limited in what we can do if we don't have.
Thanks, Jake. I do want to give you enough time to wrap up here for any other questions. Let's take one more question here. What is the turnaround time after quarantine? So Gordon Soderberg just said, just got back from Louisiana. I want to deploy again ASAP. What's the turnaround time?
Gordon, I don't have a damn clue. Lauren, are you with the current mobilization requirement there?
The one thing I would say is, certain states have a certain quarantine depending on what states you go to. So that's the first thing to just look at. If your state that you return to has any type of restriction or quarantine, if you had traveled to a certain state that meets some type of COVID case percentage, that's typically a 14-day or a negative test. So I think first and foremost, that's the first thing you want to look at. Past that within TR, I'm not positive, so I don't want to speak out of turn, but I know that would be your first thing to look at is just within your own state, what restrictions or quarantine for being out of state exists.
Put in your availability and roll call, they'll tell you. Andrew, I'll go ahead and wrap this up. First and foremost, thank you everyone for taking time out of your day to join us. We're looking at the next 24 hours with a little bit of dread. This is another major hurricane on the heels of Hurricane Laura. Let's not forget Hurricane Isaias. Last month, this has been a terrible storm season thus far. That being said, we're gonna lock our jaw. We're gonna get ready to take whatever this storm gives us. Lee is on the ground there with some of our senior leaders. They will be prepared to get Team Rubicon plugged in through the emergency management officials in the state of Alabama and Mississippi, depending on where the damage and the impact takes place. We will need your support. And so I would ask that, if you're a volunteer, get ready to put in that availability. if you're a donor, I'd ask that you give what you can. Try to influence your colleagues, your friends, your family to support as well. Going back to my time last week in Louisiana, it is truly heartbreaking to see this damage. It is heartbreaking to see these people who had little to begin with now be left with, sitting on the verge of nothing. And the only thing between, them maintaining some sense of hope and dignity and stability in their life and them kind of cascading off that cliff, are those volunteers who show up in gray shirts. But we can't do it alone. We need your support. So again, thank you. The next 24 hours will prove to be quite consequential for this part of the Gulf Coast. Team Rubicon will be standing by to update you in the next 48 hours with what's going on. So thank you for joining. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Lauren. Andrew, thank you for hosting.